I never imagined a snap judgment made in a crowded restaurant would cost me a second chance at love and reveal a truth about worth I was too blind to see. This is the story of a single father, a hasty decision, and the moment my own daughter showed me that the most important people in our lives are often the ones we look right past. At the center of it is a man named Michael, a dedicated single father and public school teacher living a life of quiet integrity, and Sarah, a woman convinced she could spot a man's potential from a single glance. It's a story that forces us to ask, how often do we let a car, a jacket, or a job title blind us to someone's true character? And what happens when the person we dismiss without a thought turns out to be the very one holding our future in their hands? Michael's world revolved around two things: his 8-year-old daughter, Chloe, and his 5th-grade classroom. His life was a carefully managed routine of early mornings, packed lunches, and lesson plans, a far cry from the high-powered corporate existence his ex-wife had chosen. His car, a faithfully maintained but undeniably old sedan, and his wardrobe of simple, functional clothes weren't choices born of poverty, but of principle. Every spare dollar went into Chloe's college fund or his classroom's supply closet. He believed value was internal, measured in patience given and lightbulb moments sparked in a child's eyes. He was, by every metric that mattered to him, successful. Sarah lived by a different metric. A successful marketing executive in her early 30s, she had built her career and her self-worth on the power of perception. She understood that image was the first and most important chapter of any story. After her own divorce, she was determined not to settle, to find a partner whose external presentation matched the ambition and stability she demanded of her own life. A blind date was a risk, but one she approached with the analytical eye of a brand audit. Their meeting was set for a stylish new bistro downtown on a cool Friday evening. Michael arrived directly from parent-teacher conferences, still wearing the comfortable button-down and khakis he'd taught in, a faint smear of dry erase marker on his sleeve. He'd parked his sedan a few blocks away after circling for a free spot, saving the valet fee. Sarah arrived 5 minutes late, a calculated entrance in a sleek red dress, her gaze already performing a swift, devastating assessment as she approached the table. The dinner was a masterclass in misalignment. Sarah spoke of market forecasts and luxury travel aspirations. Michael, trying to connect, shared a funny story about Chloe's science project. Sarah smiled politely, her eyes drifting to his shirt sleeve. She inquired about his career trajectory. He spoke passionately about a new reading curriculum and the breakthrough he'd had with a struggling student. She heard a lack of corporate ambition. He asked about her interests outside work. She mentioned her boutique fitness studio and vineyard tour. He talked about the hiking trails near the city where he took Chloe on weekends. The check came. Michael, ever the gentleman, reached for it. Sarah noticed his wallet, worn leather, and the careful way he extracted his credit card. Her final, silent assessment happened as they walked out. She pretended not to see his car as he pointed to where it was parked, offering her a lift. She declined, claiming an early morning workout, already pulling out her phone to summon a rideshare. She gave him a brief, pitying smile. "It was nice meeting you, Michael," she said, her tone the same one she used to dismiss an underperforming vendor. Then she turned and walked away, the click of her heels on the pavement a period at the end of her judgment. Michael stood on the curb for a moment, the cool air sharp against his skin. He felt the sting, not of romantic rejection, but of being summarily categorized as insufficient. He drove home to his sleeping daughter, the quiet car filled with the echo of Sarah's disinterested voice. He pushed the evening aside, a minor bruise on a life he was proud of. For him, the story ended there. For Sarah, it was a confirmed hypothesis. She recounted the date to a friend over brunch the next day, the details becoming sharper, more caricatured with each retelling. "A teacher, which is sweet, but you can just tell when a man isn't driven," she said, slicing into her eggs Benedict. The car was practically a relic, and that shirt, it just signaled a complete lack of awareness. She dismissed him from her mind, a case study in what she didn't want. 2 weeks passed. In Michael's classroom, it was the week of the big history fair. Chloe, in her own school across town, bubbled with excitement every afternoon, talking incessantly about her project and her amazing teacher, Mr. Reed, who was helping her make it incredible. Sarah, busy with a major client launch, only half listened to the chatter, offering absent-minded praise. The culmination was parents' viewing day. Sarah, wanting to be the supportive mother, cleared her afternoon. She walked the brightly decorated hallway of her daughter's school, past rows of trifold posters, following the directions to Chloe's classroom. She pushed the door open, a proud smile already on her face, ready to see her daughter's work. And there, kneeling beside a detailed diorama of the ancient pyramids, helping Chloe adjust a miniature palm tree, was Michael. He looked up, his face breaking into a warm, professional smile of welcome that froze the moment it met her eyes. Chloe, oblivious to the earthquake shaking her mother's world, beamed and grabbed Sarah's hand. "Mommy, you're here. This is Mr. Reed, the best teacher in the whole world. I told you about him." The air vanished from Sarah's lungs. Time didn't slow down. It shattered into 1,000 sharp, glittering fragments, each one reflecting a different version of the man kneeling before her. The patient teacher, the dismissed date, the man in the modest shirt, the best teacher in the whole world. Her brain, so adept at rapid categorization, short-circuited. The cognitive dissonance was a physical pain in her chest. Michael's smile had tightened, the professional warmth cooling into something careful and neutral. He gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. "Sarah, hello." His voice was even, the same calm tone he used to de-escalate a playground disagreement. He turned his attention back to Chloe, his hand gently steadying the wobbling palm tree. "There we go, architect. Pyramid saved." Chloe, beaming with pride, missed the silent tsunami crashing between the adults. "See, Mommy, isn't it cool? Mr. Reed helped me research the real mortar they used. He knows everything." "He certainly seems to," Sarah managed, the words ash in her mouth. Her eyes were locked on Michael's hands, the same hands she'd noted resting flat on the restaurant table, which she'd unconsciously coded as passive. Now she saw them differently, capable, precise, stained with a bit of clay from the diorama, actively building a child's confidence. The next 20 minutes were a special kind of torture. Sarah moved through the classroom in a daze, her high heels clicking on the linoleum, feeling grotesquely out of place. She was supposed to be evaluating her daughter's work, but her entire perception was being violently recalibrated. She saw the classroom not as a simple room, but as an ecosystem Michael had built. Walls were covered not just in colorful posters, but in student work annotated with encouraging green comments. A kindness corner held a basket of handwritten compliments students could take. A bookshelf overflowed with well-loved novels, many with his name inscribed inside the cover. She overheard snatches of conversation. A parent thanking him for staying late to help their son with fractions, another marveling at how their previously reluctant reader was now devouring books. Each piece of testimony was a hammer blow to her own judgment. This wasn't just a job for him, it was a vocation, a life's work she had mistaken for a lack of ambition. The most devastating moment came when she lingered near his desk. There, next to a stack of papers waiting to be graded, was a small framed photograph. It showed Michael and Chloe, along with 4 other children, at a science museum. They were all laughing mid-experiment, covered in what looked like baking soda and vinegar residue. Chloe's face was alight with pure joy, her hand trustingly in his. The photo wasn't staged. It was a captured moment of genuine connection. It was evidence of a relationship with her daughter that was deep, meaningful, and existed entirely outside of her own knowledge or approval. The viewing hour ended. Parents began collecting their children. Sarah stood paralyzed, watching Michael engage with each student, offering specific, heartfelt praise. He high-fived a boy, gently corrected a girl's timeline with a pencil, and promised another he'd read her extra-long essay that weekend. He was a master of his domain, respected, beloved, and she had looked at this man and seen nothing. Chloe skipped over, grabbing her hand. "Can Mr. Reed come for ice cream with us to celebrate?" The question hung in the air, a lit match dropped into a room full of gasoline. Michael looked up, his expression unreadable. Sarah's mind raced. Every instinct from her world said to deflect, to make an excuse, to escape. But the sight of her daughter's hopeful face and the crushing weight of her own mistake forged a different path. I think that's up to Mr. Reed," Sarah said, her voice surprisingly steady. She forced herself to meet his eyes. "We'd be honored if you'd join us, to thank you for all your help with the project. It was an olive branch, thin and trembling. Michael studied her for a long moment. He saw the panic, the shame, the desperate attempt at correction. He glanced at Chloe, whose eyes were wide with hope. He would never punish a child for an adult's failing. "I have to finish up here," he said, not unkindly, "but I could meet you at Scoops in, say, 30 minutes. The ice cream parlor was a kaleidoscope of noise and color that felt utterly alien to Sarah's internal state. She sat across from Chloe in a sticky booth, her mind replaying the date in brutal, cringeworthy detail. Every dismissive thought, every internal sneer, now played back to her with a new, horrifying subtitle: "You were wrong. You missed everything." When Michael walked in, he had changed out of his marker-stained shirt into a simple gray sweater. He looked like what he was, a kind, approachable man. He slid into the booth beside Chloe, deliberately not next to Sarah. He ordered a small vanilla cone. Chloe chattered incessantly, a buffer of normalcy against the thick silence between the adults. Finally, Chloe was distracted by a friend from another class across the parlor. She scampered off to say hello, leaving a vacuum of silence. Sarah took a shaky breath. "Michael, I..." He held up a hand, not looking at her, watching Chloe instead. "Please, don't." His voice was quiet but firm. "This isn't the place. And she," he nodded toward their daughter, "is the only thing that matters here. This isn't about us." His use of us was a wall. It stated clearly that there was no us, and there never would be. He was here for Chloe, period. His professionalism was a fortress, and she was permanently on the outside. "I just need you to know," Sarah pressed, the words tumbling out in a desperate whisper, "that I am so profoundly sorry. I misjudged you. I was superficial and wrong." At that he did look at her. His eyes held no anger, which was somehow worse. They held a weary understanding, a pity that cut deeper than contempt. "Sarah, you didn't misjudge me. You judged a set of symbols, the car, the clothes, the job title. You never got to me, and that's fine. That's your prerogative on a date." He took a small bite of his ice cream. "But I need you to understand something clearly. In that classroom, I am Mr. Reed. What you think of me personally is irrelevant, but what you think of my role in your daughter's life cannot be based on those same symbols. Chloe's education, her confidence, her joy in learning, that has to be sacred ground, separate from whatever this is." His words were a clinical dissection of her failure. He wasn't accusing her of being a bad person. He was stating the factual consequence of her worldview. She had applied the wrong lens, and in doing so, had blinded herself to what was truly valuable. "She adores you," Sarah said, her throat tight. "I adore her," he replied simply, without a hint of grandiosity. "She's a bright, curious, wonderful kid. My job is to help her see that in herself, that's all." The conversation was over. Chloe bounced back, and the remainder of the outing was carried by her endless energy. When they parted ways on the sidewalk, Michael gave Chloe a warm hug goodbye. He offered Sarah a polite, distant nod. "Have a good weekend." Sarah drove home in a silence heavy with revelation. The research on lookism she might have once skimmed over in a business magazine now felt personally inscribed on her soul. The human tendency to make snap judgments based on appearance wasn't an abstract concept. It was the engine of her greatest personal failing. She had confused the map for the territory, the packaging for the product. That night after Chloe was asleep, Sarah did something she hadn't done in years. She logged into the school's parent portal, passed the grades and announcements, and clicked on the staff biography page. She read Michael's bio. It listed his master's degree in education, his 10 years of experience, his award for innovative teaching from the state board. It mentioned his volunteering with the city's literacy program, the resume of a dedicated, accomplished professional, a man of substance. She then, with a sinking heart, Googled her own name. The results were filled with her corporate accolades, her LinkedIn profile, articles about marketing campaigns, a resume of surface-level achievements. For the first time, she wondered what a truly perceptive person would see behind her own sleek packaging. The question kept her awake long into the night. The following Monday, Sarah's attempt at a normal routine felt like acting in a play. At work, she found herself staring at colleagues, wondering what essential truths about them she was missing because she was only reading the corporate brand. During a client meeting, She watched a young associate, dressed in an off-the-rack suit, quietly solve a complex data problem that had stumped the senior partners. She saw him, truly saw him, for the first time. The guilt began to morph into a deeper, more unsettling crisis of identity. If she was so wrong about Michael, what else was she wrong about? What values had she been teaching Chloe through her own unspoken judgments? The thought was terrifying. Meanwhile, in his classroom, Michael was navigating his own quiet turmoil. He was a professional, and Chloe's bright, trusting face made it easy to compartmentalize. But the hurt was there, a dull ache. Being dismissed was one thing. Having that dismissal intersect so dramatically with the part of his life he held most sacred was another. He found himself being extra measured, extra transparent in his communications with Sarah, treating her with the cautious formality one might use with a potential lawsuit. A week after the ice cream parlor, a plain white envelope appeared in Sarah's mailbox at home. No return address. Inside was a note card and a photocopied article from a psychology journal. The article's title was circled, "The Durability of First Impressions and the Cost of Swift Character Assessment." The note card held a single sentence, written in neat, familiar handwriting, "For your reference, Emma." It wasn't an insult, it was a correction, a teacher providing source material. The clinical nature of it was the most devastating rebuke of all. He wasn't engaging in emotional warfare, he was simply, calmly, giving her the facts she had missed. The bridge between them wasn't burned, it was a drawbridge he had deliberately and permanently raised. Sarah stared at the photocopied article as if it were a verdict. The cold, academic language dissecting first impression bias was a mirror held up to her soul, and the reflection was ugly. This wasn't just about one bad date. This was about a lifetime of filters, a curated lens through which she viewed human worth. The note, "For your reference," was a grenade with the pin already pulled. The explosion was silent, internal, and total. She tried to proceed as if the foundation of her self-image hadn't crumbled. She went to work, but the marketing campaigns she once crafted with such certainty now felt hollow manipulations of surface perception. In a strategy meeting for a luxury car account, she found herself fixated not on the sleek visuals, but on the copy that promised respect and discernment. She was selling the very value system that had led her astray. The irony was a bitter taste she couldn't spit out. Her attempts to overcompensate with Michael were clumsy and transparent. She emailed him, thanking him for the interesting article and inquiring with excessive formality about Chloe's progress. His replies were masterpieces of polite deflection, timely, informative about Chloe, and utterly devoid of any personal opening. He signed them, "Sincerely, Mr. Reed." The drawbridge was up, the moat filled, and she was left on the wrong side, waving a white flag he refused to acknowledge. The real escalation began with Chloe's upcoming birthday party. Sarah, desperate to prove her evolution, decided to shift from her usual extravagant, themed party-at-a-venue approach. She suggested to Chloe a simpler party at the local park, with picnic games and a cake. Chloe's eyes lit up. "Can Mr. Reed come? He's really good at three-legged races." The request was a landmine. Sarah knew inviting him was the right thing, the inclusive thing, but the prospect of facing him in a social setting, surrounded by other parents, filled her with dread. Yet, to say no would be to let her shame dictate her daughter's happiness. She forced herself to send the invitation via the school's email system, phrasing it as a courtesy to Chloe's beloved teacher. His response was a study in boundary setting. "Thank you for the kind invitation. I have a prior commitment that day, but I hope Chloe has a wonderful celebration. I've attached a digital copy of the book she's been enjoying in class, which might make a nice gift. Best, M. Reed." He had declined, but in the most thoughtful, child-centered way possible. He'd given her an out while still prioritizing Chloe. It was gracious, and it felt like another door gently but firmly closed in her face. The party day arrived. The park was sunny, the simpler party was actually more joyful, and Chloe was delighted. But Sarah moved through the event like a ghost, hyper-aware of every parent. She saw a father in faded jeans fixing a piñata with practiced ease. She saw a mother in a practical sweatshirt orchestrating a game with infinite patience. She no longer saw unambitious or frumpy. She saw competence, presence, and a different kind of investment. She was an anthropologist, suddenly understanding a culture she had once dismissed as primitive. Then the "wait, it gets worse" moment arrived. One of the other mothers, A friendly woman named Lisa, who was on the school's parent advisory committee, sidled up to her during cake. "So," Lisa said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, "I hear you had a date with Michael Reed." Sarah's blood ran cold. The park noises faded to a dull roar. How did you?" Lisa waved a hand. "Oh, small world. My cousin does the bookkeeping for that bistro downtown. She mentioned seeing Michael there with a blonde in a red dress a few weeks back, looking miserable. Put two and two together when I met you at curriculum night." She took a bite of cake, studying Sarah's stricken face. "Look, don't feel too bad. He's a tough nut to crack. Lovely man, fantastic teacher, but since his wife passed, he's been completely devoted to Chloe and his kids at school. Doesn't date much. I think the last woman he went out with spent the whole dinner talking about her stock portfolio. He's just not built for that world." The revelations came like successive body blows. His wife passed. He wasn't just a divorced dad, he was a widower. The quiet composure she'd mistaken for passive hurt was the stillness of profound loss. The dedication to his daughter and his job wasn't a lack of ambition, it was the architecture of a life rebuilt after tragedy. And she was now catalogued alongside the stock portfolio woman, another entry in a ledger of people who failed to see him. The shame was no longer just personal, it was now woven into the community gossip. She was a cautionary tale, a piece of trivia in the story of a respected man. Lisa, meaning no real harm, had just publicly cemented Sarah's role as the shallow villain. Sarah's crisis reached its peak the following week. It was career day at school. She had signed up months ago in a different lifetime to present about marketing. Dressed in her power suit, her presentation slick and polished, she stood in the library waiting for her turn. Michael was there, of course, speaking before her. He hadn't prepared a PowerPoint. He simply brought in a toolbox. He sat on a stool in front of 30 captivated fifth graders and began to talk about being a teacher. But he didn't talk about lesson plans. He talked about being a detective, solving the mystery of how each student learns best. He talked about being an architect, helping them build foundations of knowledge. He talked about being a coach, cheering from the sidelines as they struggled and triumphed. He held up tools from his toolbox, a level, a wrench, a tape measure, and gave each one a metaphor for patience, for adjustment, for measuring growth. The children were mesmerized. So was Sarah. She watched him, this man in his simple sweater, commanding the room not with authority, but with authenticity. He was showing these children that his job, his calling, was one of the most complex and important in the world. The prestige he carried in that room was palpable. It had nothing to do with a salary and everything to do with respect earned through daily acts of care. When he finished, the children erupted in applause. As he stepped down, his eyes briefly met Sarah's. There was no gloating, no accusation, just a quiet acknowledgement of the chasm between the perception she had first formed and the reality now on display. Her turn to speak felt grotesque. Standing there, pitching the art of persuasion, of creating desire for products, felt absurd and empty. She stumbled through her talk, her confidence gone, seeing her own career through the devastating new lens he had just unintentionally provided. The final public escalation was triggered by a school board meeting. Facing budget cuts, the district proposed increasing class sizes and cutting non-essential programs, including the literacy support Michael had pioneered. The meeting was packed with angry parents and tired teachers. Sarah attended, compelled by a new sense of duty. One by one, parents stood to plead for the programs. Then Michael stood. He didn't shout. He presented data, improved test scores, reduced behavioral issues, letters from former students. He spoke about equity, about reaching kids the system had previously failed. He was formidable, not in a corporate boardroom way, but with the unassailable power of someone arguing for the right thing. Then a board member, a man in an expensive suit who reminded Sarah of her old self, sighed dismissively. "With all due respect, Mr. Reed, we have to look at fiscal realities. We appreciate the sentiment, but we must prioritize core competencies. These ancillary programs, while nice, are a luxury." Sarah saw Michael's jaw tighten. She saw the faces of parents who couldn't afford private tutors fall. And something in her, the old Sarah who valued the bottom line, finally died. Before she could think, her hand was in the air. She walked to the microphone, her heart hammering against her ribs. I'm Sarah Evans, Chloe's mother, she began, her voice shaking. She avoided looking at Michael. And I'm here to tell you that you are misunderstanding what a core competency is. She took a breath, channeling every marketing pitch she'd ever given, but for a new product, truth. What Mr. Reed does isn't ancillary, it's foundational. You're talking about cutting the very mechanism that identifies and nurtures talent. I'm a professional who assesses value for a living. And I made the worst assessment of my life when I failed to see the value in this man's work. The room was silent. The luxury isn't the program. The luxury is a system that can afford to lose the Michael Reeds of the world because it doesn't understand their worth until they're gone. Don't make that mistake. She sat down, her entire body trembling. She had just publicly confessed her failure in front of the entire community. She had tied her own humiliation to his defense. She didn't dare look at him. The vote was close, but the literacy program was saved. After the meeting, as people milled about, Sarah gathered her coat, desperate to escape. As she turned to leave, she found Michael standing in her path. He looked at her for a long moment, his expression inscrutable. The noise of the crowd faded around them. Finally, he spoke, his voice low. That was unexpected. Sarah could only nod, tears threatening. It was the truth. He nodded slowly, then said the words that would change the trajectory of everything. The truth, he said, often is, I have to get back to school to finish some things, but my car in the shop. Would you mind giving me a lift? We could talk. The silence in Sarah's car was a living thing. It was different from the strained quiet of their date. This was charged, fragile, thick with everything that had been laid bare. Sarah focused on the road, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. Michael sat in the passenger seat, looking out the window, giving her the space to navigate more than just traffic. After several blocks, he spoke, his voice calm. You didn't have to do that at the meeting. Yes, I did, Sarah said, the words coming out in a rush. Not for you, for me, because it was true, and because I needed to start saying true things out loud, even when they make me look terrible. He nodded slowly, accepting that. It helped, the program, it matters, so thank you for that. It was the least I could do, she said, and meant it. Michael, about the article you sent. He held up a hand. That was out of line. I let my hurt dictate a professional boundary. I apologize, it was petty. It was justified, she countered, surprising herself. I needed the wake-up call. I wish it hadn't come at the cost of hurting you, and I wish I'd known about your wife. Lisa mentioned it at the party. He was quiet for a long moment. Elena, he said softly. Her name was Elena, pancreatic cancer, 4 years ago. Chloe was 4, it's not an excuse, but it is context. My world narrowed after that, to her and to the classroom. They were the only places that made sense. The dating world, it felt like a foreign country with a language I'd forgotten. Sarah felt a fresh wave of shame, hot and nauseating. She had critiqued a man's suit while he was still wearing the invisible armor of grief. I am so sorry, Michael, for everything. I believe you, he said, and with those 3 words, the first stone in the wall between them crumbled. But Sarah, you need to understand. That night you didn't just reject me. You validated a fear I've been carrying, that the life I've built, the one that's honest and good and right for me and my daughter, is somehow less than, that in the wider world it's invisible. You looked at my life's work and saw a lack of ambition. That's hard to forget. Tears blurred her vision. She pulled the car over onto a quiet side street, putting it in park. She couldn't have this conversation while driving. I was wrong. I was so catastrophically wrong. I confused ambition with meaning. I thought driving a better car was a sign of success. But you build successful people. What you do every day is the very definition of ambition. It's just aimed at a different target, a better one. He looked at her then, really looked at her, for the first time since the classroom. He saw the raw sincerity, the absence of the polished facade. Why the change? He asked, not accusatory, but curious. What flipped the switch? Chloe, Sarah said without hesitation, seeing you through her eyes. You weren't just a teacher, you were a superhero. And then seeing myself through what must be your eyes. It was brutal. I didn't like the person I saw. I built a life on evaluating surfaces, and I forgot to look for the foundation. They talked for an hour in the parked car. The conversation meandered from grief to parenting, from societal pressures to personal values. It was the conversation they should have had on their date. Sarah listened, truly listened, to his stories about Elena, about the early days of single fatherhood, about the student who thanked him years later. He listened to her talk about her own divorce, the pressure she felt to project an image of unbroken success, the loneliness of a life built on perception. When they finally arrived at the school, he didn't immediately get out. The car being in the shop, he said, a faint, almost shy smile touching his lips. It's true, but I could have called a cab. I asked for the lift because, after what you said at the meeting, I owed you the chance to say the rest. The gesture, the admission of a deliberate choice to engage, felt like a gift. He led her into the now empty school, not to his classroom, but to the library. He went to a shelf and pulled out a worn, dog-eared copy of To Kill a Mockingbird. He opened it to the front flap. Inside there was a faded stamp, discarded. Below it, in neat handwriting, it read, "Rescued by Mr. Reed's 5th grade, 2019, still has good stories to tell." "This," he said, running a finger over the words, "is my stock portfolio. This is my luxury car. These kids, these moments, these little rescues. This is the wealth I'm building. It's just not the kind you can park in a driveway." Sarah understood. Finally, completely, she understood. The value was intrinsic, cumulative, and immeasurable by any metric she had previously used. The aftermath was a quiet revolution. Sarah didn't make a grand pronouncement. She began to live differently. She sold her expensive, impractical car and bought a reliable, used SUV. She took Chloe camping, getting mud on her new, sensible boots and laughing more than she had in years. She started volunteering with the school's fundraising committee, using her marketing skills for a cause instead of a client. She and Michael established a new rhythm, cordial, then friendly, then genuinely warm co-parents of Chloe's education. They attended school events together, sitting side by side. Sarah respected the boundaries, never pushing for more than he was willing to give. She had burned that bridge, and she knew it was her job to rebuild it plank by plank, with no expectation of where it would lead. A year passed, Chloe flourished. The literacy program, with Sarah now on the committee, expanded to 2 more schools. One afternoon, as they coordinated over email about Chloe's upcoming science camp, Michael's message ended with an invitation. "There's a new exhibit on ancient civilizations at the Natural History Museum this Saturday. Chloe's been talking about it. Would you like to join us as friends?" They went. It was easy. It was fun. There was no pressure, no evaluation. They were just 3 people who cared about each other, learning about dinosaurs. After that, the occasional as friends outing became a regular part of their lives: hikes, movies, lazy Sundays at the park. The final surprise came on a crisp autumn day, 2 years after the disastrous date. They were at Rosie's Cafe, the 3 of them, for Saturday pancakes. It had become their tradition. As they were leaving, an elderly gentleman at a nearby table stopped Michael. "Excuse me, young man, I couldn't help but overhear your daughter call you Mr. Reed. Are you by any chance the Michael Reed who wrote that article in the Journal of Educational Psychology last month? On intrinsic motivation in underserved communities?" Michael, looking slightly embarrassed, nodded. "Yes, that's me." The man's face lit up. "I'm retired now, but I was on the state board for 30 years. That was one of the most insightful pieces I've read in a decade. You've got a brilliant mind for this work. Thank you." He shook Michael's hand with genuine respect. As they walked to the car, Sarah looked at Michael, a new awe in her eyes. "You published a paper in a major journal." He shrugged, a little sheepish. "It was just some observations from the literacy program. The university helped me compile the data." The man hadn't recognized a well-dressed executive. He had recognized a scholar, an expert in his field. The prestige was real. It just existed in a world Sarah had never thought to look. The last vestige of her old judgment dissolved. Here was a man of national respect in his profession, a man who drove a 9-year-old car and found his greatest joy in a child's diorama. That evening, as they stood on Sarah's porch saying goodnight, Michael hesitated. "Sarah," he began, his voice uncharacteristically tentative, "that bridge you've been rebuilding plank by plank, I was wondering if you might be willing to walk across it with me sometime, on a date, a real one, no blinders, no judgments, just us." Sarah felt a smile break across her face. one of pure, unguarded joy. I thought you'd never ask. Their second first date was at a small, family-owned Italian restaurant Michael knew. Sarah wore a simple blue dress. He wore a button-down shirt, this one without dry erase marker. They talked for hours, about everything and nothing. The past was acknowledged, but it didn't dominate the table. They were two different people now, shaped by the same hard lesson. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. It was better. It was a realistic, hard-won beginning. They moved slowly, deliberately, with Chloe's happiness as their compass. A year later, on a Saturday morning in Rosie's, the same booth where they'd shared pancakes with Chloe for years, Michael placed a small, familiar velvet box next to Sarah's coffee mug. Inside was a simple, elegant ring. "Sarah," he said, his voice steady and sure, "you see me, and I see you. Will you build a life with me?" She said yes. Their wedding was small, in the school garden, with Chloe as the flower girl and ring bearer combined. The community that had witnessed the entire arc celebrated with them. Sarah's toast was simple. "I used to think I could assess a person's value at a glance. I was wrong. Real value is built in the quiet, daily choices, in the patience we extend, and in the courage it takes to look past the symbol to see the soul. Michael taught me that. And I will spend the rest of my life being grateful for the lesson." Michael's car, the faithful old sedan, finally gave up the ghost a month later. They donated it to a vocational school for auto repair students to learn on. They bought a new car together, a safe, reliable, unassuming family vehicle. Its value wasn't in its logo, but in the journeys it would hold. The story that began with a walkaway ended with a coming together. It wasn't about a woman getting a second chance with a man she'd underestimated. It was about a woman getting a second chance with herself, and in doing so, earning a love she was finally able to recognize. The cost of that snap judgment was her old, shallow world. The payoff was a life of authentic depth, built on a foundation of hard-won wisdom and a love that looked beyond every symbol to see the priceless story underneath. So what is the real cost of a first impression? This story was never just about a bad date or a romantic second chance. It was about the silent tax we all pay when we live in a world that prizes the symbol over the substance. We are wired for snap judgments, our brains making split-second calls on trust, competence, and value based on clothes, cars, and job titles. It's a biological shortcut, but biology isn't destiny. Awareness is the first step past it. Michael and Sarah's journey exposes an uncomfortable truth. We have built a hierarchy of visibility. We are culturally trained to see the CEO in the corner office, but often blind to the teacher shaping the minds that will one day sit in it. We applaud the visible, external markers of success, while the quiet, foundational work of building character, knowledge, and resilience happens in the background, underfunded and underappreciated. The story asks us, what priceless contributions are we missing because we're looking in the wrong places with the wrong metrics? This isn't just about dating. It's about the colleague we dismiss because they're quiet, the artisan we undervalue because their shop is modest, the caregiver whose work doesn't come with a fancy title. Every time we confuse someone's circumstances with their character, their resources with their worth, we don't just limit them, we impoverish our own world. We cut ourselves off from connection, from mentorship, from partnership, from the simple richness of a truly diverse human experience. The redemption here wasn't that Sarah won back a good man. It was that she had the courage to dismantle her own operating system. She allowed one devastating, personal failure to become a catalyst for a deeper way of seeing. She didn't just apologize, she changed her life. She realigned her values with what actually creates meaning: contribution over consumption, depth over dazzle, the long-term building of a person over the short-term acquisition of status. Their family, built from the broken pieces of grief and misjudgment, stands as a small testament to a different way. It is a family that understands its own foundation. It knows that love isn't found in the first glance, but in the unwavering willingness to take the second, third, and 100th look. It's a family that measures wealth in rescued books, in student breakthroughs, in quiet Saturday pancakes, and in the hard-won knowledge that the most important things are often the most easily overlooked. Your life is filled with Michael Reeds, people of profound depth and value whose packaging doesn't match the commercial ideal. They are in the classrooms, the workshops, the community centers, the offices next door. The invitation this story extends is to turn down the volume on the world's loud, shiny signals and tune into the quieter frequency of character. Ask a better question. Not what do they have, but what do they build? Not what do they drive, but where do they invest. It's a practice, a daily choice to look past the symbol and seek the story, because the people who change our world and the people who change our hearts are rarely the ones shouting the loudest from the flashiest stage. They are often the ones working quietly in the background, their hands stained with the honest dirt of meaningful work, waiting for someone with the clarity to see them. If this story resonated with you, if it made you think of a moment you judged too quickly or a person you now see differently, then you've already begun the work. Take that curiosity with you, share this with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more documentaries that explore the hidden stories and quiet revolutions happening all around us. Because the most extraordinary truths are often hidden in plain sight, waiting only for us to look, not just see.